Hey everyone, I'm Nisha and welcome to Tales in Text. Today's video is going to be a book review, and I am with this video I'm going to be reprising my books and tarot playlist, which I had started when I was running my previous channel, which is South Asian Mystic. And for today's video, I've chosen a special book which I recently completed, a book that has won many accolades and whose author is one of the most celebrated writers in the Indian subcontinent. And the book that I want to talk to you about is After Kurukshetra by Mahasweta Devi. So this book was actually pretty interesting, and I want to talk to you about what this book is based on, and who can actually read this book, because unlike actually most of the books that I've covered in my books and tarot reviews, this book can only be read by a certain subsect of people, and I'll talk about why and how you can read this book if you currently don't fall into the subset of people who I'm going to be talking about. So first off, I've got my iPad over here so that we can do some research together about Mahasweta Devi, so that I can give you a context about the author herself. So I'm just going to be reading out a couple of important facts about her. So Mahasweta Devi was born in India, or rather the pre-independence India, current day Dhaka, Bangladesh, in 1926 and on 14th of January. And she recently passed away in 2016 in Kolkata, which is a part of current day India. Now, Mahasweta Devi was a Bengali author, feminist, and activist, and all of her works reflect her dream and vision for a modern and inclusive Bengal, and by extension, an inclusive and modern, future-focused India. All of her works have been written in Bengali and then translated into English, and even After Kurukshetra has been translated by a translator of the name Anjum Katyal. Now, Mahasweta Devi is a prolific writer who has won numerous awards, which include, alright, get ready for this, Gnanapita Award, Padma Vibhushan, Indira Gandhi Award for National Integration, Ramon Magsaysay Award for Journalism, Literature and Creative Communication Arts, Sahitya Akademi Award for Bengali Writers. Phew, that is a really wonderful and prestigious legacy. And her books and her writings have just revolutionized not just the Bengali literary landscape, but also the landscape of Indian literature and Indian translations as well. I have got a couple of her other books as well, which I want to read soon. I've got those on digital version. This is actually the only one that I have a physical copy of, and the only reason I got the book is because I couldn't find a digital version. So other books that you can pick up apart from After Kurukshetra is Mother of 1084, Rudali, Breast Stories, Imaginary Maps, and many more. Now you can find these on Amazon. That's where I got this book from. Now, After Kurukshetra is a book that is a interpretation of the epic of Mahabharata from the perspective of the women who've been left behind after the war. Now, very specifically, I want to do clarify that these women are not the main women that you find in the epic. For example, Draupadi or Subhadra or Kunti or Gandhari or any of the others. These are women who were the wives, mothers, daughters, sisters of the foot soldiers, the soldiers who had the least amount of respect and protection and privilege, and who were just instruments of war. And very specifically, I do also want to note that Mahasweta Devi was a activist for the Dalit community, that is for the classes that are considered to be lower classes according to Hindu caste landscape. And most of her books deal with writing about the Dalit experience in India. And true to that, even after Kurukshetra focuses on the Dalit experience of the members who were considered to be Vaishyas and Shudras or untouchables, and what their wives and their daughters and the other women in their families experienced after the war was over. Now, this book was quite interesting in terms of some of the sentences that were there in the book. Now, in terms of the story itself, if you are familiar with the Mahabharata, this book wouldn't really feel groundbreaking or revolutionary, because it still remains within the confines of the Mahabharata. Now, in saying that, this is where I want to talk about what kind of people can actually read this book, and if you need to do some extra groundwork in case you don't fit into this sort of mold. Now, in order to read this book, you do need to have a certain level of familiarity with the Mahabharata, even if you don't read any extensive information about the epic. You need to have a certain degree of familiarity with the epic itself. So, for example, I would recommend that you read Rajgopalachari's translation of the Mahabharata, which is something that I picked up when I was a child. That was my first exposure to the epic in the form of a book, apart from the bedtime stories that I used to get from my mom. And so you need to have a certain awareness and familiarity of the epic. So if you don't have that, then this book won't make sense, because like I said, this is from a very minute subsect within the epic, and it focuses on the emotional landscape and the experiences of people who are very intricately interwoven within the epic itself. So yeah, if you want to pick up this book, you have to definitely have a familiarity with the Mahabharata. So I would urge you to read the Mahabharata in its abridged or unabridged form, whichever you prefer, so that you can get yourself ready for this book. Now, coming to the stories itself, we focus on 3 stories over here. And the first story is of the Panchakanya, which is the 5 women, and this story focuses on the handmaidens to the Princess Uttara. Now, the Princess Uttara, I'm gonna go very just sort of superficially over here. Assuming that the people watching this video are kind of aware of the Mahabharata. Now, Uttara is the wife of Abhimanyu, and also she's the mother of Parikshit, who is the sole surviving heir of the Pandavas, and by extension the Kauravas as well. So Uttara is pregnant. Her husband's recently died. The war is over. She's distraught. She's just a young bride, and she's depressed, and she's sunk in this pit of depression. And the Panchakanya are handmaidens who come from the Dalit society, and it's as much about them helping Uttara overcome this sorrow, or rather come to terms with the sorrow. I think that's a better way to describe it. Come to terms with the sorrow and move on, or start to live her life, as it is about them exploring their own sorrows surrounding the war. Now, that's the first story. The second story is Kunti or Nishadai, which is Kunti and the Nishadin. So Nishadin refers to the Nishadin community, which is one of the communities of forest-dwelling people who are considered, who were considered untouchables, or rather the lower class people, or mlechas, so that is people who didn't know Sanskrit, who didn't speak Sanskrit. They are essentially the indigenous communities and tribal communities of India. Nishan is one of them, that is to say. So the Kunti and Nishadins focuses on the life of Kunti once they have moved on to the Vanaprastha ashrama, that is, they've given up the Grihastha ashrama, that is, they've given up the householder stage, and they've moved into the forest, into the renunciation stage, wherein they've gone into the forest. They live on the bare minimum food that nature provides them, and they essentially walk around in different forests, getting in tune with Mother Earth and awaiting death. So the Kunti and the Nishadin is a story that explores Kunti's fraught relationship with the war and all the choices that she made, which contributed to the war, which resulted in the death of her son, and generally about how she grapples with the fact that could she have possibly been the cause of this war, and could she have stopped it, had she just been smarter. And the Nishidin plays a role in terms of how the experiences of the Nishidin versus the experiences of Kunti, and the emotional connection that they have. And this was actually a very, very, I think of all three stories, I found this one to be really great in terms of bringing up certain questions about what it meant to be a woman in an ancient Indian society, and what it means to be a woman even today in India, wherein, to a certain level we have freedoms and we have these opportunities to be what we want and do what we like, but still we are enmeshed in this cultural and social fabric, which can sometimes be suffocating. So it brought out a lot of questions about patriarchal societies, about being a woman in a patriarchal society, about what is dharma, following the rules that are set out for us. Do we have a choice in, or rather do we have the agency to make different choices, or are we just pawns in the hands of fate and time? So this story was actually very interesting in that way. And the final story was about Sawali. So Sawali is the mother of Yuyutsu, who is the bastard son of Dhritarashtra. And this story basically focuses on Sawali's internal emotional landscape and her own experiences and the way she looks at her life and Yuyutsu's life after Dhritarashtra's death. Again, this was also really interesting because if I consider all three stories, Kunti and the Nishidin and Sawali are very I would, at least in terms of looking at the Mahabharata, it's very feminist in nature. It focuses on women's agencies and women's powers. I think Sawali, of all three, Sawali is the most feminist story in this book. And it was really nice to listen to a character whose thoughts aren't so ensnared by the traditional definitions of what it means to be a good woman, what it means to be a good wife, what it means to be an upholder of dharma. You come across a lot of questions that and sentences that the author talks of, which really makes you think. And especially if you belong to, it's a fact of life that Hindus in India today also belong to different castes, whether many of us identify with our caste and identify with the ethos of and of the heritage of violence that has come down with the caste or not. I'm going to set that aside, but the fact remains that all of us do identify with one caste or the other. And if you belong to some of the castes that are considered to be the upper caste, and you read this book, which is basically told through a Dalit lens, it really makes you think. And I think that's very important because it allows you to really question your own inherent privilege. And it allows you to think of life in India, not just in the ancient times, but even today, from the view of what it means to be a person who's born into an upper caste family versus what it means to be a person who's been born into a lower caste family. And today so many of us don't actively engage in casteism, at least to my knowledge, in my personal sphere, I've not seen that, and I acknowledge that there are many people who do that even today, and it's just a very sad and very unfortunate thing and just horrifying, but we all benefit from the privilege of casteism, right? If you are a Brahmin, you benefit from certain privileges because your ancestors have been Brahmin too, and because of that, from that comes a sense of privilege that's already there, that you're benefiting from this privilege. And there were a lot of sentences in this book that really makes you think about what it means to be a Dalit in India, and what it means to have your life considered to be inconsequential and so negligible that in the grand scheme of things it doesn't really matter. Not just in the grand scheme of things, I think even in the more nuanced version of things as well, your life doesn't matter when compared to, say, a Kshatriya or a Brahmin. And it really makes you think, and I really like the book for that. What I wouldn't say I did not like, it's more about what could have been a little different. I think that has more to do with the translation by Anjum Katyal, is that the overall translation of the book seems very rigid and formal. There is a lack of emotion that sort of comes out through, or rather, there's an absence of emotion when you read the book. The book doesn't really call to you or touch an emotional chord within you. It feels like there is this coldness in the translation. So something does feel like it's got lost in translation. So my suggestion is, if you can read Bengali, I would suggest you pick up this book in Bengali itself so that you can experience her writing firsthand. As always, Indian languages are very difficult to translate because there are just so many different play on words, and the essence of the language and the word you use and the grammatical structure is vastly different from English. So a lot gets lost in translation. So I would suggest, if you know Bengali, read it in Bengali. Like I said, the book makes you think, but emotionally it doesn't really connect with you. But the thing is, this book is just 55 pages. It's really short. You can finish it in an hour. Even if you read each story on a separate day, it hardly takes about 10 minutes to finish reading each story. It's just a very easy read. And I personally loved the way the printing has been done. So for example, there's a lot of margin space here, and the write-up is pretty big, and you can make a lot of notes. I've actually made a bunch of notes. I'm just trying to find, like, for example, I've made notes over here, right? So there are a bunch of places where I've made notes, and the having an extra space on the side has really helped with this book. Like, for example, over here, like, I've literally just like scribbled all over this page over here. So yeah, pick up this book. It's a good book. I wouldn't say it, like I said, it's not emotionally captivating, but you will definitely start questioning a lot of your experiences in India, and also you'll start questioning the Mahabharata itself. And I say this because the Mahabharata is considered to be this dharma yuddha, that is this war of righteousness, and but the question remains, what exactly is dharma, and whose dharma are we espousing generally? Is it the dharma of the Brahmanas? Is it the dharma of the Kshatriyas? What about the people who were forced into war, such as the soldiers and foot soldiers and all, or charioteers, who were from these lower castes? They were very poor people, they were farmers, or they were, for them this was just a job. They didn't stand to gain or lose, irrespective of who won the war, the Kauravas or the Pandavas. And they were just forced to do this because it's their job. They couldn't say no because they would be punished if they were to become deserters. So a lot of people lost their lives. And where is the dharma in that? Where is the righteousness in that? Is there any righteousness in taking innocent blood for personal gain? Now, I know that this is just one way of looking at the Mahabharata. A lot of time, if we look at the critical translation of the Mahabharata, which I'm actually going through right now, it's quite extensive. The Mahabharata is not just described in the form of the physical act of the war, but there's a lot of discussion about the philosophical long-term magnitude or the large-scale magnitude of what these experiences mean. And we look at this war and this story from a very philosophical perspective of how it affects entire humanity. Setting that aside, there also comes a question of what exactly is the dharma of, sacrificing millions of soldiers who never asked for this war, who were forced into battle, and whose families were destroyed because of just one family's infighting. Mahabharata, I've always maintained it's my most favorite book in the entire world. It's my most favorite epic in the entire world, because it brings up so many questions of ethics and morality that there's no one or the other. There's just so much in between that we need to consider. And this book definitely makes you consider it from a Dalit perspective, which is really nice because I've not read many books which consider that. I have read a lot of interpretations of the Mahabharata, focusing on different characters. Maybe I'll make a video of that someday. But this book has been the first one wherein we've focused on the Dalit experience of people from the lower caste, and especially the women who've been left behind because their men are all dead. So it was really interesting. And if you enjoy reading the Mahabharata, or if you want to read an Indian author, especially an Indian female author, we have very few already in documentation. So it's good to read and catch up on women Indian authors. So definitely pick up this book after Kurukshetra. Alright, so now just before I end the video, like always with books and tarot, I want to show you the cards that I picked for this book. Now the first card that I picked is the card Justice. So for me, after Kurukshetra is about justice, because like I said, what is real justice? What is real dharma? Is there justice in forcing people who have nothing to gain or lose from this war to be the maximum casualties of the war? So for me, that's justice. The presence of the raven indicates death, because even in Hinduism, the presence of a crow, which is very similar to ravens, also indicates deaths and ancestors and the cycle of life and death as well. To me, the raven holding this sort of flower kind of a baton indicates how the scales of balance constantly keep shifting, and right now death has the upper hand. The earth is willing to receive the blood of a million people, and where is the justice in that? Like, especially if the blood happens to be of people who do not gain anything by sacrificing their lives. So that's one card that I picked up. Another card that I picked up was the archetype of the orphan, because this particular book reminds me of the value, or the orphaning of ethics and values. The orphaning of not just ethics and values, the orphaning of the women, of these Dalit women, of these poor women, they've been left behind now because their menfolk are gone. And how do they start over, especially in a patriarchal society? How do they start over? And also the orphaning of values, because you really, in this book there are a lot of questions where you see the stark difference between what the women from the royal household what they believe versus what the common folk believe. The impact of the war upon them. Sure, the sorrow that has visited everyone is the same, because a lot of people, both in the royal household and in the common folks, lost the people that they loved. But the way this war is viewed as dharma yuddha, this view of the dharma yuddha is starkly different between people who stand to directly benefit from this war and those who don't. And I think the orphaning of values comes there for me from that, and that's why I've chosen this card. So yeah, this was an interesting book review. This is an interesting book to read, very easy to read. So do go pick it up, and if you stuck around till the end, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you soon. Bye.